Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 51 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. So I had such a great discussion with Bethany Gardner and Molly Hasson of the Eluna Network for this episode. And Eluna is a national grief support network here in the U.S. They run both Camp Erin, which is for grieving kids, and also Camp Mariposa, which is for kids affected by a family member's addiction. They have locations all across the U.S., so I would encourage you to check that out. They also have a fantastic online resource library. So some of the topics we discussed on this episode are the resource library they have online, including the personalized support that they have available free of charge through on their website. We also talked about both Camp Erin and Camp Mariposa, including what kids can expect from activities at those camps and who they're for, what age groups, and who qualifies to go to those camps. And we also talked about the New York Life Foundation's extensive involvement in and support of these camps and Eluna's programs. So I hope you enjoy my discussion with Molly Hasson and Bethany Gardner of Eluna. My guests today are Bethany Gardner and Molly Hasson of Eluna Network. Molly is the director of the Eluna Resource Center, and Bethany is the director of bereavement programs. They're joining us today from Seattle, Washington. Molly and Bethany, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
For having us.
Yeah. So I'm really happy to be talking with you guys today, and I want to hear all about Eluna and all about the Resource Center and about the camps and everything else you guys offer. But I have to start by telling you, this might sound kind of strange. I feel like I have this personal connection to Eluna. You guys used to be called the Moyer Foundation, and I'm sure you'll tell us later about how it got started and the name change and all those things. But the reason this is relevant, actually, and maybe longtime Seattle people or longtime Mariners fans will remember that Jamie Moyer was our pitcher meaning the Mariners, back in the 90s and early 2000s. And that was kind of my early adulthood in this area. And so, of course, I remember all that. And anyway, when my husband was sick in 2015, he got diagnosed in May. So it was baseball season, right? And so all the times he was in the hospital and the care center and home and back in the hospital, and there were a lot of hours to fill every day. And I was so thankful that it was baseball season because, there's always a game to watch practically every day when you're right.
And they're long.
Yes, yeah. Right? And so I would always try to time my visits to the hospital when I could, if there wasn't a reason to go for an appointment at a certain time, I would try to go during the baseball game so we could watch together. We both grew up here in Seattle, and so that was a kind of a fun thing to do. And, we weren't doing day trips or outings or things like that. So baseball was a good thing to do. So anyway, one day I was over at Swedish in Seattle, sitting in his room watching the game. And it was in August of 2015, which was the day that Jamie Moyer was inducted into the Mariners Hall of Fame.
So cool.
Yeah. And so they had a whole presentation, before the game, I think. And they talked about his baseball career, and then they talked about how he had gone on together with his wife to found what was then the Moyer Foundation. And they talked about starting Camp Erin, and they talked about meeting Aaron Metcalf and, that inspiration. And anyway, they talked about it being a camp for kids who had lost a parent or a sibling. And I was sitting there in the hospital that day, watching the Mariners with my terminally ill husband next to me and watching this presentation and thinking, wow, I better write this down because, we were only at that point, May, June, July, August, like 3 months into his illness. But I just knew that someday Camp Erin would have to be on my radar screen as something to look into for my kids. So in the busyness of all that, I think I sent myself an email, here's the link, look it up later.
Yeah.
And then I didn't think about it for another, 6 months or whatever. And then I was like, wait, what was that thing again last summer? And I pulled it up. So it's a very long way of introducing this.
That's such a cool story, though, Jenny, because, I mean, we've heard that story more than one. You're not alone. I mean, I think that Hall of Fame event really builds a lot of awareness about the Moyer Foundation.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really beautiful day, and it makes sense it grabbed your attention because it was just, for the Seattle community, pretty special to honor Jamie's legacy on the team, because we had a pretty phenomenal team when he was playing.
Yeah.
And then also his impact through the foundation. And so that's a great story.
And did you say you were there that day?
I was.
Wow. Maybe I saw you on TV.
Yeah. Probably not. I was in a seat very back in the far corner enjoying the festivity.
Well, you never know. You never know. But, you know, I mean, being a lifelong really Seattle fan and resident, and my husband also growing up here, kind of held a special place in our hearts. So anyway.
That's cool.
Long way of introducing
that.
Yeah. So why don't we jump into talking about Eluna and what you guys do and all these things. But let's start, if you guys don't mind, with how did you get involved in this line of work, and how did you end up at Eluna, and what's your role there today? So Bethany, why don't we start with you?
Sounds great. So I just consider a major gift that I found my way into the grief support world. When I was finishing my master's, just over 10 years ago, I needed a job that would complement my clinical internship. I was working with youth elementary through high school and school-based counseling, and I was lucky enough to be connected to an opening at Providence Hospice of Seattle in the Safe Crossings program, which is the largest grief support program for youth and families in our region here in Seattle. And I worked on that team for almost 4 years. They host Camp Erin, Seattle. So that's where I was introduced, you know, in a really in-depth way to the Camp Erin program. And I really learned, you know, a lot of what I know about grief and loss for children and families with that team, and they're phenomenal. The work they do is just really beautiful in our area. So
I should jump in. I should jump in and say we actually also use Safe Crossings, starting while my husband was sick, you know, a few months before or something, and then through until sometime after he died. So wonderful program. So for listeners in the Seattle area, I'll put a link to Safe Crossings for sure, because I think it's a great resource.
That's great. So I transitioned from Safe Crossings to Eluna. It was the Moyer Foundation at that time. My role has been to oversee the Camp Erin network, the national network, and as well as support Eluna's work, raising awareness around childhood grief and loss and our other initiatives to support families, as well as tool professionals around the country, especially and to support youth in the camp setting. And actually, yesterday was my 8-year anniversary at Eluna.
Yay.
Oh,
just
really?
got to celebrate that. Yeah.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. And so, Molly, how about you?
Yeah, so I was, when I just got out of college, I was actually a nanny for a year for 3 children whose father had died just after the 3rd child was born. And so I had like a frontline experience with grieving children when I was pretty young, and they had been to counseling, and the way that they talked about their feelings and the way that they talked about their father was very impressive to me as a young, you know, post-college kid. And so when I actually started working after I had my first child, I ended up working again for the woman who I was a nanny for, because she started the Safe Crossings Foundation, which is the fundraising arm for the Safe Crossings program. So I was the first employee at the Safe Crossings Foundation in 2004, which now that I think about it is a long time ago.
Well, that's 15 years ago.
Yeah, but thank you for doing the math.
I had to do the math there. I had to actually look at my computer clock to tell me what, you know, date it was.
So I've been working to raise money and build awareness around children's grief for 15 years. And as, you know, someone who worked at a children's grief organization, I would get phone calls all the time from people who were supporting us, or just the public looking for resources and referrals. And of course, we had Safe Crossings program to refer them to, and also Camp Erin. And so I was used to getting those calls and really like just connecting with people about children's grief, which even in the last 15 years, the way people talk about hospice and palliative care and children's grief has totally changed. It's so much more open now and people are more willing to talk about it. But anyways, so 8 years later, I was still working for Safe Crossings Foundation after getting, a little bit more schooling underneath my belt. I have a master's degree, and I was launching a grant program for them. And the Moyer Foundation applied for a grant for the Resource Center, which is what I do now. And I had personal experience with the need of having this referral sort of function and a hub where all the resources are. So I knew that the need was there. I called Bethany, actually, because we had worked together to launch the first Northwest Grieving Children's Conference. A few years before that. So we knew each other before, and I called her and I said, I want this job. What do I have to do? And so that's how I ended up working at the Moyer Foundation, which is now Eluna, but was really excited to work on launching this new program for them. So that's my history. Yeah.
Terrific. Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so why don't we then jump into talking about Eluna and starting with how did it get started? I know we've touched on that a little bit with the Moyers, but can you guys just tell us how the Moyer Foundation, Eluna got started and what its mission is?
Absolutely. So Eluna, or the Moyer Foundation, was founded in 2000 by Jamie Moyer, who was a pitcher for the Mariners at the time, and Karen Phelps Moyer. And prior to the formalization of the foundation, they were committed to the community. They invested in philanthropy that supported primarily children and in the healthcare setting. So the foundation was really their opportunity to formalize their commitment to that mission as well as the Seattle community. And the early years of the foundation included support of Seattle and Washington-based grassroots organizations, all the way to multi-million-dollar commitments to large institutions in the region like Seattle Children's Hospital, Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center. Over time, our programs developed, and our mission is now more focused, and it is to support children and families impacted by grief or addiction. So there's an evolution over time to a more broad support of children in distress, which was our earliest mission, to now more focused on children and families impacted by grief or addiction.
Gotcha. And your scope, I think, where the foundation started out very community Seattle focused. I think now you're a nationwide or maybe worldwide, I'm not sure, but a much broader and not place specific scope, right?
That's correct. It was really the growth of our programs that led to that growth of our mission over time. And we can share a little bit more about that too when we talk about each program later.
Sure. Okay. And you guys are in Seattle, but I think your headquarters now is somewhere else, right?
That's a good point. Yeah, most of our team is now located in Philadelphia. Both cities have connection to the Moyer family. Jamie transferred from the Mariners to the Phillies, where he won the World Series in, I think, 2008. And he's from that region. So when we looked to establish a second office to better represent our more national presence, Philadelphia was a really good choice for us.
Gotcha. Okay. I did not know that he went to the Phillies later. My sister lives in Philadelphia now, so maybe I should have known that, but that's awesome. Okay, cool. Okay, so what services then do you guys offer? Well, actually, before I ask that, we've mentioned Eluna, we've mentioned Moyer Foundation, so can you just clarify for us, I think one is the old name and one is the new name?
Yeah, so we can probably just say Eluna going forward.
Gotcha. Okay.
We rebranded about a year ago, so we're just moved because of the national scale and a lot of other reasons. We just decided that we wanted to launch with a new brand. It's Eluna, and it sort of encompasses all of our programs. And so we have 3 signature programs. We have Camp Erin for grieving children. And then we have Camp Mariposa, which is for children impacted by the substance use disorder of a loved one. And then we have the resource center that's designed to support these two populations and the adults that directly impact those children's health and happiness. So we have 3 signature programs, and that kind of encompasses all of our services.
Yeah. Okay. Well, fantastic. So let's talk about these one at a time then. Why don't we start with the resource center, since we were just talking about that? Okay. What is the resource center, and why did you guys create it?
So after about 15 years of providing camp programs, the board of directors was very clear that they wanted to expand and broaden our continuum of care for these children beyond the camp weekends. So before and after, and also for kids who couldn't get to camp. So the Resource Center was sort of born out of this demand to provide support before and after camp, and also for families who can't make it. And having worked with experts in the field through our camp partners of grief and addiction for so long, we knew that we had a strong foundation for building content for this library, this online library that we wanted to build. So we surveyed our partners and asking them what families and children need. And the survey has really provided the outline for the topics and what we explore on the Resource Center. The library is built around grief and addiction, but it really explores related topics as well, including things like, how to talk about tragic events in the news, or what does counseling look like, or here's a 10-minute meditation, mindfulness, and here's how emotions move through your body, and this is how to talk to them about bullying. So really related topics that, again, were informed by a survey that we did of our camp partners who are really on the direct service line with kids and families. So we wanted to make sure that we were informing this library with people who are working directly with kids. And as I mentioned earlier, working with Safe Crossings and the Moyer Foundation, really any grief support program is pretty consistently receiving calls from people who are looking for resources and referrals, like, where do I go when my best friend's husband's just died? And this is why we have this call out on our resource center for personalized support. We wanted to sort of maintain that legacy of providing referrals to people and really expand on it and sort of deepen that service line. So the Resource Center is really 2 things. It's the online library and the personalized support. And since we've launched, we've helped over 500 families through personalized support. And I get calls and emails from teachers and social workers and friends who are looking to support their best friend who, just lost a grandma, or the stories are just really amazing, actually. Everybody has such a deep personal experience with this. And I just love doing the personalized support piece because it's so personal. But the majority of inquiries really are parents who tell me that, their son or daughter they're just starting to experience the grief of a parent that they lost a year ago, or it's acute and they just lost and they didn't want help, like, how do I deal with a funeral? So a lot of times it's parents who are just experiencing that right away, and they just are looking for ideas of support. So I provide a list of additional online links, and I provide like a warm referral to a program in their area. So, I get calls from all over the country because we do have some brand awareness throughout places all over the country. So I get a lot of calls from Florida, for example, and where do I go? And so I give them a name, a program, what are the offerings at that program, what time is the, age 7 to 12 group that they have at this one grief support center. So really personalized support that way. And then I also provide them, like, what does it look like for a 7-year-old versus a 12-year-old, and developmental grief information. And usually ends up being like a 5 to 10 page report for them that they refer back to, and it has online links and it has program information. So trying to sort of give them the tools to support their children.
Terrific.
Yeah.
And do you charge for that service?
No, it's free.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so people who are listening then they don't have to just be in Seattle. I think you said they could be
all over,
from anywhere.
Yeah.
And you could help connect them to information and resources in their area and things really based on their specific need.
Yeah, I usually start out with the ages of their kids, not the names, and their zip code. So I really try to locate it and be as specific as possible. And those two pieces of information really add to the depth of the report. So yeah, anyone can call me or email me, reach out through our website, and I will provide that report. And we try to do it within 24 hours.
Wow. Incredible. Okay, great. Well, I'll be sure to put a link to that in the show notes too, because I think that'll be a terrific resource. I know that's one of the questions that I hear all the time is, kind of feeling lost or not sure where to start or where to turn for information or resources or whatnot. So
that's exactly why we built the resource center.
Yeah, good. Okay. And then if they don't reach out to you for the personalized help, then you said you also have online a certain amount of like downloadable, browse through and download kind of what you want or what piques your interest. Yeah,
so the library online is designed to serve the adults who are supporting children and grieving kids and kids that are impacted by addiction. And we specifically put a lot of thought into making it as easy as possible to navigate and search, because just knowing that people are coming there in, just right in the middle of trauma. So I made it so that when you get there, you can identify yourself. You can say, I am a parent looking for resources on, and then there's another drop down and it's like grief or addiction or bullying or mindfulness. And then it takes you directly to a list of related resources. And then we also have a grief section. So you can see the topics that I kind of mentioned before that were determined by our partners. The headings are, how do you talk to kids about it? What can I expect? How do I talk about traumatic death? And then there's also a bunch of suicide resources on there. So it should be and then, you can search for any keyword and it will pop up with, there's hundreds of resources on there. So and there's book recommendations, there's activities, there's how to care for your camper when you're on your way home from camp. So
okay.
Lots of resources on there.
Yeah. Okay, and you mentioned you can choose a drop down and choose who you are looking. So you mentioned a parent. It could you? Are there also, you could say like, I'm a friend, or I'm a. What are some of the other options?
Grandparent, educator. We also have support professionals. So I also built a tool for grief support providers so that they can search the resource center, build a list of specific resources, kind of like what I do in the personalized support side for the clients that they're serving, save that list and email it to whoever needs the help.
Oh, so they could come in and pick out these 5 articles and then save that into a list that they email a link or something with just those 5.
Exactly. And it's called My Save Resource. So every resource has a little purple plus button, and you can save that to a list. And we wanted to make that easy again also. So it's not like you have to create an account and put in your name and address. It's just, you just get a link and it links out to those 5. So so it's for parents, educators, friends, grandparents. And we do have some resources for young adults, teenagers, and even kids. And you can watch a Sesame Street video on the Resource Center.
Huh. Awesome. Okay. Cool. And can you give us just a couple examples of what maybe some of your most popular resources have been?
Yeah, so we add custom content on a monthly basis. And this past year, we added some that I'm really proud of. We work with our subject matter experts and our partners. For this year, we've been asked for many years to build a resource that would help grieving parents introduce a new love to their children. So we have one called Widowed Parent, How to Introduce a New Love, and it's written by Diane Fromo. I think you worked with some as well.
Yes, I interviewed her, and the episode number off the top of my head, I feel like it's 12 or 14. It's around in there, but yeah. And she's got a terrific book as well. So I'll put those links in the show notes too. Yeah, awesome. I'm glad you guys
so
have that
I worked closely with her, and we built a resource that I think will be really helpful. to building a path sort of for families who are approaching this stage. And she was so thoughtful about that. So that's a good example of the custom content that we provide. This year we also added a resource that specifically helps people who are supporting a grieving child with autism spectrum disorder, which is such a different way of thinking. And we worked with someone at a grief center who is an expert in helping those children. They have such specific needs when it comes to funerals and talking about death and grief and dying. And so we embedded links to visuals so they can print those out and have a tool to talk to kids, and also just to get the kids talking, to get them talking about their feelings. One of the interesting things about that resource is just helping the kid find a way out. So when they feel overwhelmed, like how to get them to say, I need to take a break, because it can be so overwhelming. So the resource really does encourage families with that special need to provide a safe space and permission to find a timeout when things are getting overwhelming. And those are just two examples of the ones that we've done this year, but we also have really classic and important things like 10 Things Grieving Children Want You to Know that was created a long time ago. That is really one of the standards in children's grief support, or 7 things that ways to talk about death. And then the developmental stages, so you can look up what your 8-year-old is going through versus what your 12-year-old is going through, as I mentioned before. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Terrific. You mentioned grief and kids with autism, and that's reminded me of another fascinating discussion I had. It was actually episode 33. So Arlen Gaines and Meredith Polsky, and they wrote a series of books called I Have a Question. And one of them is I Have a Question About Death, and one of them is I Have a Question About Cancer. And they're specifically they're for all kids, but they're written with an approach and a style and a focus on serving kids with autism and helping them understand those topics. Yeah, we had a really fascinating discussion about it. They had a lot of I think good tips and insights.
That's great. I can add that link to your podcast and the books as well to that resource.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Cool. Oh, thanks. All right. So, the Resource Center sounds like a terrific, pardon the pun, resource.
I've tried so many different times to find another word to describe it, and I just keep coming up with resource. That's why we have resource and support, and we go back and forth, and we tried to come up with a clever name, but we really wanted people to know what it is.
Yeah.
The Resource Center. Yeah.
Sure, for sure. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we'll put a link to that for sure. Okay, and cool. I hope that people will look at that and
reach out.
Yeah, and share what they find too with their widowed parent friends. If they find something really helpful, tell others about it. Point them to it and stuff like that.
Great. Yeah, and awesome. It says right on there, contact Molly, and that's me. So
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's got your phone number and email, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and it also will direct you to a contact form if you want to fill that out, and that kind of encourages you to tell me the ages and the zip codes so that I can get to work right away on the report.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. All right, great. Good. Anything else on the Resource Center before we switch to Camp Erin? I think we covered it.
Yeah, early, you just did a great job of summing it up.
Okay, good. I didn't want to miss anything if before we switch gears here. Okay, so Bethany, let's talk about Camp Erin. So first of all, What is it? How did it get started? What's the backstory?
Okay, so Camp Erin is a national network of overnight grief support camps for youth grieving the death of a significant person in their life. And camp usually runs from a Friday to a Sunday, so 3 days and 2 nights. And it combines grief education and emotional support with all the fun traditional camp activities you would hope to experience at camp. Mm-hmm. And one amazing strength of our programs is that we utilize a partnership model. So Eluna partners with organizations throughout the U.S. and in Canada that support grieving youth and families year-round. That's their mission and their expertise. So we come and we equip them to create a Camp Erin program and to provide safe and effective programming in the camp setting and they bring their wealth of resources throughout the year. So families can connect just to camp or to a whole continuum of care at that organization. Mm. And there are currently 37 locations across the U.S. and Canada, and 37. With a total of 40 sessions offered. Yep.
Wow. And did I read somewhere that basically every Major League Baseball city has a Camp Erin?
Has or has had. So organizations change their focus over time. So we may have had a camp in that location, but that partnership ended. So we did accomplish that at one point. I'm not sure it's still true right now.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. But people could maybe use that as a starting point for thinking about, like, maybe there's a camp near me. Let me go check it out.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that was our first roadmap for expansion as we grew the program. Since then, once we accomplished that, now we work with really strong interested organizations, or we try to look at our map of camps and think where there's the greatest need and not grief camp programming, or maybe not even much programming available at all for grieving families.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of partnerships, I think you have some kind of partnership with New York Life on this as well?
That's correct. Yeah, the New York Life Foundation is, just in general, the premier supporter of childhood grief support in the country, and they are our major funder and supporter for Camp Erin. So their funding supports our local programs, as well as projects that enhance the knowledge of our providers, as well as the depth of programming in our camp programs. And then in addition to the national support from New York Life, we also have the support of local agents and offices. So our Camp Erin partners are connected to local agents, and they give their time. They do fundraisers or in-kind donation drives to support the camp weekend, and just give back at that local level at all. And honestly, we couldn't do the Camp Erin program as it is without New York Life nationally and locally.
Yeah. Awesome. I think I feel like I've seen, like, maybe on New York Life's, maybe on your social media somewhere, and you'll be shouting out, the New York Life team in this city, thank you for coming out and volunteering at camp this weekend, and they're wearing their shirts, and they're, it seems like they're very involved.
Yeah. Yep. They're amazing. They have, the New York Life company in general has what they call Volunteer for Good. So giving back in local community is a part of their identity in general. And then the foundation chose childhood grief support as one of their primary categories quite a few years ago now, before I even started in the field.
Well, I know when I interviewed Maria Collins about what they're doing, and we mostly talked about StoryCorps in that episode, but we talked a little bit about their other programs, and she really articulated well how strongly they feel, the New York Life feels, that they don't want to just deliver a check. They want to also deliver resources and information and things that help, on top of obviously the check, the claims that they deliver, but that they didn't want to, they wanted to kind of take extra steps beyond that to really help the people who are their clients and others.
That's right. And to equip their agents in how to support families who are bereaved.
Yeah.
So even before we had our resource center, a project that launched over 10 years ago now was Eluna's National Bereavement Resource Guide. And that was developed really to let agents know where they can find support for their clients in their local community. That, our resource center now is a little more vetted. The National Bereavement Resource Guide is much more comprehensive, but it's also lives on our website and is a great resource for people looking for support. It's organized by state, and it starts listing camps and then lists organizations. And it's going to go through a facelift in the next 6 months to make it more searchable as well.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So, so Camp Erin. So why is it called Camp Erin?
Yes, I love talking about this part of our story. Camp Erin is named in memory of a young woman named Erin Metcalf. She developed liver cancer when she was 15 years old, and she met Karen and Jamie through her Make-A-Wish at spring training in Arizona. So she was a softball player, and that was what she wanted to experience. And she met Karen and Jamie as well as some other players, but the Moyer family and her family connected really easily and became good friends from that point moving forward. And Erin, from the stories I've heard, was just a remarkable person. She had a really compassionate heart, a silly spirit. I was looking back at some notes from, I talked to her mom just to glean more on her just story about a year ago. And, you know, she was just a normal kid. She loved playing games. They love playing Nerds, which is a fast-paced game that my family, well, I love, the rest of my family hates, so that's more fun for me. But she and her sister, she has 2 older sisters that I have had the privilege of meeting and spending time with, but they love to play practical jokes on each other. She loves country music. Her favorite was Garth Brooks. She loves sleepovers and pizza on Friday nights. A lot of that, but then some other things that I learned about her. She was just focused on life in a way that, you know, not every teen is. She kept a gratitude journal during her illness. She paid attention to other kids who were suffering and expressed concern about their siblings. She just, I think she had a big heart, and it became even, you know, more focused during her illness, which I think is amazing.
Mm-hmm. And then sorry, go ahead. Yeah. So moving the story along, she died from her cancer when she was 17. And after her death, Jamie and Karen wanted to find a way to honor her memory and her caring spirit. And they thought about her love of children and her desire to help others. And they felt that a grief camp for children would be a really appropriate tribute. So they partnered with the hospice based in Everett, Washington, where Erin received her end-of-life care, to launch Camp Erin in 2002. Aha. Fantastic. Yeah. So 2002, so that is 17 years ago. So do you have any idea how many campers you guys have served in all these locations over all these years?
It gives me chills when I look at this number, but over 31 youth have attended Camp Erin. 31,000. 31,000. That was not very effective. Want me to do that one again?
31,000. Fantastic. So
31,000. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And okay. So who, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to acknowledge too, when Camp Erin was founded, there was not a goal for it to become a national network. It was just so effective that 2 years after the program was offered in Everett, the Providence Health System, their sister program in Seattle, launched their program. And then from there was 1 to 2 programs added a year until in 2008 was our first big national expansion push, where we started adding like about 10 programs a year until we were in this, you know, somewhere around 40 range. So
awesome.
Erin's parents' names are Jerry and Michelle, and they live in Woodinville, Washington, and I get to connect with them at our local Camp Erin programs every year. And I love to reflect with them on just how it must really just kind of blow their minds sometimes to think about Camp Erin being, you know, launched in honor of Erin's memory and her beautiful spirit, and now to know that it's impacted over 31,000 youth.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, what kids are eligible to go? Who goes to Camp Erin?
Yep. So Camp Erin is for kids primarily ages 6 to 17 or school age. So every once in a while we have a 5-year-old attend, sometimes an 18-year-old if they've just finished high school. And camp is for youth grieving any relationship of loss. So it could be a family member or a friend, or, you know, any relationship that family considers significant, and then any cause of death. And there's no parameter around the length of time since the death, although, you know, we do work with clinicians to make sure that we're far enough away from the death that it's a safe experience and not too overwhelming for kids. But some, you know, are coming to camp 6 months after a loss, some 3 years or more, depending on when they're ready and when they hear about camp.
Well, that's an interesting question. You mentioned working with clinicians to make sure it's maybe not too close to the loss. I mean, is there how do you know if a kid is ready, and or are there some guidelines on when are effective or not effective times to go?
Sure. You know, we like to really honor that it's different for every child and every family. And so we look first to to the parent guardian and that camper as like the expert on their own journey. So we know if they're reaching out for support, something is needed. It may not be camp. It could be one of the many other resources in that organization. So when a family reaches out to the camp director or the clinical director in that organization, they'll start a process. And that includes an application where a lot of information is given and an in-person, usually if it can happen, an in-person assessment time, which is really a conversation that's both helpful to the family as well as that camp director. And that's where, maybe some anxiety comes up, is my child ready? Or maybe the camper is like, I don't want to go to camp. And that could be what starts the conversation. So a good parameter that our clinicians use is, if it's somewhere between 3 and 6 months after a death, they'll really want to think about, is it time yet? And that's where they'll have a conversation. And it could be that family has already participated in a group or maybe have been working with a social worker from the diagnosis of an illness through the death. And they have a lot of experience doing this kind of work. And so camp is a really comfortable way to receive support. And so that's a nice flow. It might be that a family needs to experience like a group or individual support and practice sharing the story of the loss or receiving support in a group context before attending camp. So it's really a lot of factors that impact readiness.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like whichever organization you're partnering with at that particular location would have clinicians then who would talk with the parents, talk with the kids, and kind of help make that determination whether they're ready this year or maybe whether they should wait till a future time.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's really important to remember that going to a grief camp naturally causes anxiety. For most families, it's a new experience. For many families, the child has maybe not even slept away from home since a death. They may not have gone to sleepaway camp in general. So there's a lot of good reasons to be a little anxious. So there are a lot of kids who before camp are like, I don't want to go. I'm being made to go. And to me, that's different than a child who's like, I'm absolutely not interested. And that boundary needs to be really honored. Supporting them to get to camp, is a different story than that for me. So, because normally what happens is a camper is anxious, but they get to camp and then they're like, I'm so glad I came. Camp Erin is the best. And like, I would tell every grieving kid to come to Camp Erin. So just paying attention to that difference.
I've heard that from multiple families, and sometimes with kids in the middle school, young teenager range, and the kids are, I don't want to go. And then somehow they end up going, and then they're so happy they went afterwards. And, we're glad that they were kind of forced to go or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's especially true for that age group you mentioned. With teens, they have a lot of things that are demanding their time. In the season, in the summer season, they may be preparing for sports or other leadership or have jobs. And getting to camp could be a sacrifice and require a really strong commitment from the teen and the family. But for that age group, I think, we really feel the impact in that season of their life is so significant. I've heard stories when I worked with Camp Erin in Seattle of a camper that the previous year at school, went to school every day with a hoodie, over their face, just was so withdrawn, not accessing support and not really engaged in what was happening around them. And they went to camp and came back to school the next school year, and the school counselor didn't even recognize them. They were just just so open. And when I think about all of the important decisions that are happening in that time in someone's life, to be able to access support for many parts of their life is so critical. So I think if you can get a teen to camp, camp is important for everybody, but it's just really powerful.
Okay. And then briefly, what can kids or parents expect? What do you do at a grief camp?
Yep. Great question. So what we're hoping for campers to experience at camp are opportunities to build relationships with peers who have experienced something similar, not the exact same story, but something similar, as well as, really caring mentors and volunteers. But they'll be able to express their story, so the narrative of the loss maybe, and the feelings that they have around that experience or since then, address changes in their life and some regrets they may have. We want them to develop coping skills and have fun. So the camp shifts between grief support activities and fun camp activities. And the grief activities are going to include things like, art therapy, movement, expression. So that might be like a grief hike, or you can visit our website, our media page, and see a video that shows kids throwing plates, where they've maybe done some writing on their experience and they get to break it up. So like some really powerful expressive experiences, or drumming, things that really work out feelings. Mindfulness experiences. So when our camp directors sit down to create a camp schedule, they're thinking about kids who have different learning styles, who are gonna, like some are gonna sit and they'll want to create a mosaic for 3 hours, whereas another camper is going to be done in 20 minutes. So they're thinking about a lot of different needs. So they're developing some education and support opportunities to meet those different styles. And then they're going to also have fun camp activities. So swimming, boating, ropes course and zip line, climbing walls, just normal sports and field games, campfires, all the other things that you could imagine having at camp are Camp Erin campers experience. And we think we want campers to always feel safe, of course. So one of our very important rules at Camp Erin is it's always okay to say pass. So they're going to have all these opportunities, but if one doesn't feel comfortable, they can always say pass and have other options as well.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And 2 more questions. Is there a cost to attend, and how do you begin? Like, how do you find a camp near you and get hooked up with starting to apply or whatever?
Yeah, great question. So camp is free of charge for all campers. Wow. And if a family needs some support with transportation, our camp directors will help address that or any other needs to make sure that campers have what they need to go to camp. Mm-hmm. So that's, with the Resource Center and our other program, Camp Mariposa, that's one of our core values, is we really want to remove any barriers from getting to camp. And, even if a family maybe has the means to pay for a camp experience like this, families that are grieving are dealing with a lot, and we just want to simplify the process and make it as easy as possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you about Camp Mariposa next, but how do you find Camp Erin?
You can either reach out to Molly through the Resource Center, and she'll connect you to the Camp Erin location closest to you, or you can visit our website, and there's a Camps and Programs tab. And when you go to the Camp Erin and or Camp Mariposa camp tab, there's a Find Your Camp map. So you can see there's stars that show where the camps are. When you click on that location, you're going to get contact information for that local camp director, their website. Most of our camps have either downloadable or online application opportunities, so all of it will be there for you.
Okay, great. And connect to that partner organization who's running that particular camp near you. Okay, terrific.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, you mentioned Camp Mariposa, so that is a different camp. What is that?
Okay, so I can talk about Camp Mariposa. But one of the things I want to say about camp that is, because I'm not as close to it as Bethany, I think one of the most amazing things about it is that for some kids, it's the first time they realize that they're not alone and they're not the only grieving child. So there's other people who have lost a loved one. And sometimes that's the only thing that matters. That's what transforms them sometimes. It's just oh my gosh, the first thing they do when they get to camp is share their story, and they put a picture of their loved one up on this board, and then from then on they're all bonded. They all know that they're not alone. And just that feeling of it takes away the isolation of grief, which is so pervasive, not just for kids, but for grown-ups and for everybody. It makes it so they have a safe place and they're not alone. And that feeling can be really transformative. And that's kind of, transition into Camp Mariposa, that's the same sort of feeling we try to get at Camp Mariposa. It's a little bit different in that it's more of a longitudinal program because it's every other month for 3 years. So these campers are age 9 to 12. They are encouraged to go every other month for 3 years. This 9 to 12 age range is really kind of a sweet spot for prevention. Camp Mariposa is a mentoring and support program that has has been proven to break the intergenerational cycle of addiction. So, yeah.
So it's not, so Camp Erin is for the kids who are grieving a loss. Camp Mariposa then is for kids whose families have some involvement with addiction?
Yeah, so it's people, 30% of the Camp Mariposa campers are foster kids because their parents can't take care of them. There's also a large percentage who are living with their grandparents and extended family. It's basically, it's for kids who have someone that's close to them that is impacted by the disease of addiction, or we call it substance use disorder. So many of the children so it's for age 9 to 12, but then there's been so many kids who want to stay in the program that we've continued to develop programming for older kids. So now if you're 13, you can become a junior counselor, and there's mentor opportunities for kids to stay involved with camp because they really want to continue to be a part of the community of this camp that has provided so much continuity for them and support for them. So it was launched in 2007 by the Moyers, who had another sort of personal experience where they had a family member whose mother was impacted by substance use disorder, and they were like, we have this great camp program with Camp Erin, let's try and build a similar experience for kids. Just same thing like I just said, just so they know that they're not alone. And they worked with a lot of experts around the country, including Claudia Black and other national experts, to develop a curriculum and program elements that are built around sort of the 7 C's, which are, I didn't cause it, I can't control it. I don't know all the 7 C's by heart, but it's pretty amazing. I can't cure it, but I can take care of myself by communicating my feelings and making good choices and celebrating myself. There's the 7 C's.
Love
Terrific.
those.
Yeah, so Camp Mariposa, there's probably, I think there's 12 or 14 camps around the country. Again, like Bethany said, you can find the camp on the map, on the website. It's really great. It's a really impactful program as well.
Terrific. Okay, great. Well, I'll put that link there too, and encourage any listeners for whom that might be relevant to take a look at that program for sure. And if they have kids in that age range of 9 to 12 or so. And then as well, of course,
Jenny,
Camp Erin.
Yeah, and I wanted to share, we've been really fortunate to have some funding, some federal funding to support that program that allowed us to do some really important research on the long-term impact of the Camp Mariposa program. And the 2 key areas they were looking at, because the goal is to interrupt the cycle of addiction in a family. So they were looking at the delay of first use of substance for youth, as well as eliminating and preventing involvement in the juvenile justice system. So pretty amazing statistics. Over 90% of campers currently who participate in Camp Mariposa have not used, or who have participated in the past, have not used any substance to get high. So 90%, which is pretty phenomenal, considering the risk factors for that group of youth. And then over 95% have had no involvement in the juvenile justice system. So
terrific.
That's pretty phenomenal impact, and a really unique impact. There's not many opportunities like it to support youth. Yeah.
Terrific. Good. Well, I'm glad you guys have developed that program and, continuing to run that. And that's terrific. It's great to hear about all these resources out there. And I hope that listeners who, could find whether it's Camp Erin, Camp Mariposa, or the terrific number of resources in your library, can go and, make good use of that.
Yeah. I mean, everybody knows someone who has one of these issues, and, a friend or a family member. And those are the kids we want to make sure feel supported.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Hey, so I think we're actually reaching the end of our time today. So we're going to have to wrap it up, unfortunately. I just have one last question, Bethany, for you here. If you could say one thing to widowed parents, what would you say to them?
I love this question. And it connects to what Molly shared earlier about the biggest impact we hear back from campers is, now I know I'm not alone. I always thought I was the only one. Now I know I'm not alone. And I think I want to say that you're not alone. we would like you to know that there is community available for you, both in your own grief and to have support in supporting your children. So please connect to us to help either through our programs, or we want you to connect to programs in your community so that you don't feel alone on this journey.
Mm-hmm. Okay, terrific. Well, thank you so much. I think that's a great place to end. So my guests today are Bethany Gardner and Molly Hasson of Eluna Network. So Bethany, Bethany, where can listeners find you if they'd like to learn more about your work and connect with Eluna?
So you can visit our website, which is elunanetwork.org. And as I said earlier, you can visit that Camps and Programs tab for information on the camp programs. And then the Resource Center is found on the Grief and Addiction Resources tab. Mm-hmm. When you do visit our website, I also encourage you to visit the media portion of the website. There's some really great videos there that share about our programs. You can see some footage at both of our camp programs. There's links to some articles. NPR just did a long piece. I think it's an 8-minute piece on, Molly, which program was it?
It was on Camp Mariposa. I saw
All
that.
Things Considered.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think it was All Things Considered. I'll put a link to that. Yeah, I'll put a link to that in the show notes too, for sure. It'd be worth taking a look at.
That's great. And then feel free to follow Eluna on Facebook or the Eluna Network on Instagram. Facebook focuses on sharing stories of grief and loss, like inside and outside of our programs, as well as resources. And then the Instagram account is actually really focused on creating community for youth and families. So it's a lot of really great photos from camp and stories and ideas to help people continue to think about how they can feel supported and connected on their journey.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. Okay, well, Molly and Bethany, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you so much, Jenny.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Bethany Gardner and Molly Hasson of Eluna as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 51. I hope you also had a chance to catch some of the recent episodes, the January 1st episode, which was a look back, the best of 2019, and also some of the episodes in December, right before the end of the year, the episode with about anxiety and grief with Claire Bidwell-Smith. I really encourage you to check out her book. It's fascinating. And also the interview I did with Carmel Brannock about her experience of losing her mom as a child. I hope you'll have a chance to listen to all of those and also go back and check out the entire backlist of episodes. You can go to widowedparentpodcast.com. And actually, if you go to the page at the top, there's a link for Start Here, where I have grouped the episodes into different categories. So you might take a look at that as well. Okay, hey, thanks for listening in 2019, and thank you for starting off 2020 here with the Widowed Parent Podcast too. Talk to you next week. Until then, keep smiling.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.